Hi, this is Ron Gannett again, and I hope you're enjoying these videos on suffering. We're asking ourselves as a congregation, how do we walk uphill? How do we deal with the adversities that come into our lives? In the last video, we talked about some of the reasons why we suffer. We looked at the fact that sometimes we just don't know. We have to count upon the wisdom that God has in James chapter 1, verse 5, and ask Him. And also that we live in a world that's been cursed. It's abnormal. It's not the normal world that God created, and that abnormality touches us. Today, I'd like to talk to us about the impact that abnormality has of sin upon our lives and the lives of other people. Another reason we suffer is because of the choices that other people make. Back in the Old Testament, there was a man named Achan in Joshua chapter 7. He stole some material things from the conquest of Jericho. And because he hid those things, in the next battle, 36 innocent men died. 36 innocent soldiers. And eventually Achan and his own family died because of that man's sin. You know, often we suffer because of the choices that other people make. Like those men that flew the planes into the World Trade Towers. Or a deranged young man who goes into a school in Connecticut and shoots people randomly. Innocent people suffer because of the choices of others. I remember visiting a young boy in jail one time, and he was there, and as I talked to him, I thought, why would this boy make such bad choices to end up in this situation? Then I recalled his upbringing. All of his kids, all of his siblings were out of the house. He was the only one left when his dad left his mother and went with a much younger woman he met at work. And I thought, probably this little kid never recovered completely from the damage, the impact of that dad's choice had upon his life. Maybe you're suffering today because of the bitterness of an in-law, or the dirty work behind your back of another person. My friends, the choices, the sinful choices of other people bring suffering into our lives. Another reason we suffer is not because of their choices, but because maybe of our choices. In Acts chapter 5, Ananias and Sapphira, a couple, stole some money from the church, and because of that, they had to die. It was a result of their sin that caused the pain in their lives. I had a young man one time, in his anger, he put his fist and arm through a sliding glass door. That wasn't meant to happen. And last time I saw him, I said, "How's your arm doing?" He said, "Well, I have permanent damage, and I don't have the full use of that arm." Every day of his life, when he senses that weakness, he'll realize that the choice he made that night still has an impact upon his life. You know, there is abuse in this world. There are ways that we abuse substances. There are angry words that we give to others. There are ways that we make bad choices or cheat financially or even in relationships. And those sinful choices can haunt us with the results in our lives. That's why Charles Stanley, the famous television pastor, says, I think the purpose of suffering is to make us hate sin because we see the impact that it has upon our lives. But then I think there's a third way suffering helps us deal with sin, is that it prevents us from sinning in some ways. The Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 12, he says, I prayed 3 times that God would remove this thorn in the flesh from me. We don't know what that thorn was. Some people think it was an eye disease that made it difficult for him to see. That's why some of his letters he had scribes write. But he says, the reason God gave me that, he said, was to keep me from boasting. Here the man who wrote half of the New Testament that we have, that turned the world upside down for Jesus Christ, could have become arrogant. But this thorn in the flesh probably made him not look very nice. It made it difficult for him to function. And he realized that God was trying to use that suffering to humble him. What about you? Do you see the power of sin? How it's shaped and hurt your life? The choices of other people, even your choices? Or how is God at work today using things to prevent you and to shape you into the person He wants you to be? I had a woman come talk to me one time about how bad her husband was. And I'll tell you, he was a rascal. But my advice to her was, you can't change him, but you can change your choices. Why don't you ask yourself how you are failing, how you are hurting him, and pull back from those activities, follow the clear teaching of the Word of God for a faithful wife, and see if it doesn't impact his life. The next time I saw her, I said, "How's it going?" She says, "You cannot believe the change in my husband." You know, her husband didn't change. She changed by refusing to allow sin to impact her and her relationship. My friends, let's remove suffering in many ways by removing the influences of evil upon our lives. And let's trust God and walk with Him so that we can be the people He has called us to be and honor Him in fresh ways.